P0 or Sub-Zero incidents. These are things that we often think about wanting to really avoid because something bad has happened. But when I got talking to my guest, Michael Kill, we were looking at these as unique and very powerful learning experiences. And if you're a more junior engineer, these can be some of the best opportunities for you to learn about a whole system around you because the other engineers you're with are also learning incredible details at the same time. So I think this is a really interesting conversation. I think it's a helpful perspective for people to have, and I think that you're really going to enjoy it. So sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Michael, thanks for joining me. If you don't mind kicking us off with a little bit of your career journey, and as I mentioned before the call started, as sort of early as you'd like to go would be great, but
Sure.
you don't have to start at a particular point.
Okay. So I did not study computer science, computer engineering, or any of that in college. I think I started as a computer engineering major, but I like partying too much to really
Sure.
have that rigor.
Yep.
So I switched to what they called imaginary engineering, which is really industrial engineering, and
Okay.
spent that's what my degrees are in, and really the I found that I was doing a lot of programming in those courses, mostly because the professors that I had were big on simulation. So like simulate this factory, simulate this machine, and I really enjoyed like, okay, let's see how we can make this simulation as efficient as possible. Let's see how we can figure out how this factory floor. There was a factory in Skokie where we need to move the machines around and change it. Like, what's that going to look like? What's the whip going to look like? All that kind of stuff. Got out of college, got my first job at a consulting company, interviewed at Microsoft on campus, and they were like, tell us what a linked list is. And I was like, I've never had to use that, and I don't know what you're talking about. So I learned what a
Yeah.
linked list was in my interview with Microsoft after,
Perfect. Yes.
as I was graduating. So did consulting for a while. Started off as a Java developer. That sort of came to an abrupt halt at like shortly after 9/11. Like I think the Friday
Okay.
after 9/11. So that's how back this is going. Spent a lot of time. I mean, they had a pretty nice severance package, but like a couple months. Like spent a lot of time after that unemployed and unable to find a job. So much because the economy had just pretty much ground to a halt at that point. I was to the point where I was going to Target and Barnes and Noble and applying for like stocking jobs.
I see.
And
Okay.
like I need to be able to like pay my mortgage because because the days before 9/11 were pretty heady. Like they were, I mean, it was also like pre.com bust, pre all that. So like I didn't have money to put money down on a condo. But like pretty like 9/11 happened, the whole economy grinds to the halt. I'm like, I need to be able to like maybe make this stretch 6 months, 8 months. I went in and filled out the little floor worker thing at Target and Barnes and Noble. Target never got back to me. Barnes and Noble got back to me, I think 6 months after I had actually started my next job. So it was fun. I was like, Target doesn't even want me, which isn't, to disparage Target, but it was like, I got a master's degree. I'm pretty sure I can
Yeah,
hang
in terms of
clothes.
the qualifications, it feels like there's a discrepancy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So then an old manager from the consulting company had found a place and he called me up and I went to work there. It was a startup. Most of the companies I've worked for have been pretty small. It was a startup. I think there were maybe 80 people there, basically doing marketing websites for law firms. The big, the AmLaw 100, the big giant law firms, they all have websites, and it's a very big ego thing, I would say. Like everybody wants the nicest website so they can compare it, at the conferences, and not a lot of traffic, I would say, like a fair amount, but mostly from like people looking themselves up.
Okay.
Um, but and then I stayed there for about 8 years. Yeah, I think about 8 years, and I had just gotten burned out on it. I didn't want to I didn't want to care about whether or not some lawyer's photo was showing up on the website correctly, sort of framed. And like these were the things that were big deals. Like they would call up and say, why is my picture not showing? Why does it look skewed? And it's like
hard to be motivated by what the actual outcome of the work is. Okay, yeah.
Exactly. So I had been working on a side project for a while that it started to get some traction. I started to get a couple clients, and my wife had finished school at that point, so she had an income and insurance, and I had very good money from a bonus that I had gotten in 2007. So in 2008, I said, "See ya." Started my own company. That was right before 2008, which was another sort of dismal economic event. So that was a lot of stress. Everything since running my own company has felt like a vacation in terms of a job.
Before we move on, this is just a reminder that I do have courses available on DomeTrain if you want to level up in your C# programming. If you head over to DomeTrain, you can see that I have a course bundle that has my Getting Started and Deep Dive courses on C#. Between the two of these, that's 11 hours of programming in the C# language, taking you from absolutely no programming experience to being able to build basic applications. You'll learn everything about variables, loops, a bit of async programming, and object-oriented programming as well. Make sure to check it out.
Like 100%. Wow. Like nothing will compare to that stress at all. Once we started hiring people, I think we grew to about like 12 people.
Wow.
At the biggest. It was just like, how are we going to make payroll? Who's not paying their invoices? Who do we have to disappoint today in terms of the clients? Because we only have so many people and they want all these things. So it was very stressful. And then my wife and I had our second child, and it was like, okay, I can't dedicate the amount of time that I need to dedicate to this startup to keep it running. So when basically shut that down, like there was no acquisition, there was no buyout, there was no nothing. It's just like we gradually over a period of time let people go, and then one day, I had one employee into like 2012, I think, that was still servicing one client, but they left, and then the client was just like, okay, we'll figure something out. So anyway, no, that wasn't 2012. That was supposed to have been like 2018. So in 2016, I shut the company down.
I see. Okay.
And then, so it was 8 years, and then I got my first foray into healthcare at that point, which is. It's a really like for the amount of money that gets poured into healthcare and healthcare technology, it still amazes me, even to this day, like years later, like how bad some of it actually is. And I don't mean like, I don't mean to say like, your data is not secure, like all this stuff, but like the underlying, like the underpinnings of what the data look like, how bad it is, like how it's miscollected and miscategorized. It's just like, we should be better at this.
Like there's no consistency. It's like there's your data's flowing, but it's like it's just a mess from all these different sources. Yeah.
Like the amount of one of the things that company was working on is like letting patients know before they go into the doctor's office exactly what's going to happen. Right. So let's look at their history. Let's look at, their medical history, their charts, like the reason for the visit, all that kind of stuff, and come up with some sort of communication blurb that we can send to the patient to let them know, hey, when you show up, this is what's going to happen, because the hypothesis of the business was people don't show up for appointments because they don't know what's going to happen, and they don't their default is it must not be important. Right.
I see.
So true hypothesis, I think, but it was just like, how do we get a narrative created? Now with like ChatGPT years later, that would be very, very easy. We might, but like back in the day, like in 2016, I don't know that would be that simple. So I was there for a couple of years, had kind of a falling out with the founders. I was the founding engineer there. And then, or I was the first engineer, let me put it that way.
Sure, yeah.
And then left there, went and worked for another startup in Chicago that did logistics, like actual fulfillment logistics. It was I did a little like 7-year stint in logistics. Great company, loved the company. Like would be there today if not for like one or two decisions that they had made that just did not jive. They they never had a CTO, so I reported directly to the VP, and somebody convinced them they needed a CTO. And since they were a logistics company, they went, let's bring in a CTO from Amazon. And, some of the horror stories about Amazon are not true. Some of them are. And just the way of working and the way of thinking and the level of, top down sort of control that is had there. Again, I was in a fortunate financial position where I could do this, but I was just like, either you're right about this or I am. And either way, I need to get out of your way. Right. Like I just
yeah, like at some point it doesn't matter who's right. It's like it's just too much friction to operate.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And the guy, and eventually the guy that hired a CTO and everybody else was like, we got to disagree and was it disagree and commit? Is their big phrase. Yeah. It's like, no, I don't. Like I can go find another job. Like this isn't the army. I can leave whenever I want. So that's essentially what happened.
There's parts to that I definitely align with, like the disagree and commit, but you can't just say that as a blanket statement for absolutely everything if you literally are not comfortable with committing to it.
Right.
So
like how do you like disagree and commit? Okay, like you can say the sky is blue and I can say it's azure, right? Like there's a limit there, but how big that disagreement can be. And once you cross it, like, and you realize who the person is that you're talking to, it's like, you're that guy.
Yep. Crap. In which case, time to move.
It's time to move. Went from there to another logistics company, stayed there for about 3 years, trying to get some work done there. They ended up, it was like a last ditch effort to like save a particular business line. And that didn't turn out to be the case. It just didn't work. They had a few clients that were sort of like allowing the whole experiment to continue. And when those clients said, okay, we're going to go our own way, then like the whole thing just sort of shut down. Which, happens, right? I mean, like, I could probably talk about that for an hour or two, but learned a lot of stuff there. I think that was the first place I was at where I had stopped coding. Right. So even previously, even previously in my last role, I was still pushing code to prod. I was still part of the dev team. Felt like I could get my hands dirty. This place, based on the technology stack that they had, I was just so inexperienced with it. I had been, from 2002, I think, when .NET, the first version of .NET dropped, like I'd been a .NET person until like, and I still am, but that was a little window
right
where
decision. That's right.
It is. They were a Java shop on AWS. And
I'm so sorry.
It wasn't bad. Like the technology was really fine.
They put their curly braces on the wrong lines, though. It's just, and they don't have the same casing. It's not okay.
And there's a factory every third line. It's just not good. But the technology was fine. It was more like, how do we find product market fit for this business? It was essentially an acquired business, like for this within our org. And we tried and, ran into political stuff inside the company and a whole bunch of stuff. And finally that one client left and they were just like, you know what, let's kill it. There's other options, which brought me to where I am today, which is Aspen Dental, or the Tag Group, which is like Aspen Dental is one of like 5 companies under, you've probably seen their ads on TV, or YouTube or whatever, right? One of 5 companies underneath, in this the Aspen Group umbrella, but really it's dentistry, not dentistry as a service, but like I think the original founding proposition is like dentistry for Christ, now I can't remember what was the company, the company where you could get eyeglasses in about an hour. LensCrafters. Oh, it was like that's right, the dentist. It was they started off as like the dentistry version of LensCrafters.
It's
Like that
funny
was
because
part of
that
their
branding
founding
is so
proposition.
strong that I forgot the company name. But when you said that, I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I just can't remember the name. But like,
Yes.
that's how strong
Yeah.
the brand is. Like the message. Yeah.
That anybody who needed glasses like knew lens crafters because in
Yeah.
a pinch you're like, I broke my glasses. What do I do?
Yeah.
You can get a new pair in an hour. But it was so that's where I am now. I work mostly on the clinical side of the house. So writing the software, like when you go into the dentist and you see like your the image of your teeth with all the problems on it. That's actually called an odontogram. I didn't know that until about a year ago. And like how the doctor records all that stuff, like how they track the progress. We're using a little bit of AI now to like
Cool.
figure out, like help the doctor identify like issues with the teeth. And then the process of like, if you do need something implanted, you could call it like an appliance, like a crown or dentures or
Okay.
whatever, like the manufacturing process for that is also my teams, I should say, manage all those workflows.
Cool. Okay.
So I've been there for about a year. It's been good. There've been a couple of P0s, both from
Yeah.
a leadership perspective leading into this. There's been both P0s from a leadership perspective. A month after I started, the CTO was asked to leave, and the CIO, who had just recently started, I think, sort of took over like the entire dev shop, which was a huge change for the people in the dev shop. Like different personality entirely, different
Mm.
cadence, different expectations for what
And
was
how
being
long
done.
after you started? Sorry, I know you just mentioned it, but you said you had started, and just after that they changed, or right
Yeah.
before?
So just after, so I
I
started
see.
in June of last year, and I think it was like late June. Because one of the things I've learned, frankly, like the tip to everybody, like if you're gonna leave a job or negotiate an exit date, have it towards like late in the month. And the reason I say that is your benefits, your healthcare specifically, but your benefits will carry until the end of the calendar month, regardless of when you leave. But if you can start your next job like in that same month,
Mm.
then usually there's a 30-day grace period, like a 30-day window before your insurance kicks in. So you only have, like, if you time it just right, you only have to pay for a month of Cobra. And yes, that's one of those things I've had to learn, like the hard way of just like,
Sure.
because Cobra's not cheap. But in any event, sorry. So I started in late June of 2024, and that transition happened, I think, August 2nd of 2024. So
Okay, so
I
yeah,
was there for like a
quite.
month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was just getting used to like, okay, what's the vibe in the office? Like, how do people like to work? And then that, like, we came in, I think it was on like a Tuesday. We came in that Wednesday, and it was like, everything's different. It was like, okay, let's figure out how this goes now.
Right.
And we had a number, like, speaking of P0s, right? We had a number of people who just said, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this, and exited themselves, or
Wow.
yeah. There
So
was,
like, that dramatic of a change, then? Yeah.
yeah, well, it was, I think it was both, who the old guy was and who the new guy was. It was very sort of uncertain.
Mm.
There were a lot of people that had followed the old guy to the company from a previous company. So there was a lot of loyalty there,
Right.
which is usually why I don't like doing that kind of thing, because like you lose one, you lose five people. But so yeah, it was a substantial change. I'd say it probably knocked us back on our feet as an org for at least 2 months of like, okay, like what are we doing? Who's in charge? Who's setting the priorities? Which honestly, like, there was a call. I think I saw one of you were speaking to a young woman about like code debt or like tech
Mm.
debt and like not going rogue and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
making sure everything's communicated. Like those little windows of like, there's 2 months of chaos. Like nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what the alignment is. It was like, strike while the iron's hot, guys. Like, what are the 2 months? What are the things that you can get done in 2 months that like they wouldn't otherwise fund,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
like we can get done.
Yeah.
And we got some great stuff done. So in any event,
That's
yeah. So
well.
that's where I
On
am.
that note, that's super
Yeah.
interesting though, because that must imply that there is, and I'm not. I guess you weren't suggesting otherwise, but to me that seems to imply that there was actually like a lot of I don't know what the right word is, like passion. I don't think is maybe the right word, but that people were super motivated. There's like, we want to get some really awesome stuff done. Like, let's go do it. Like, we have this
Oh yeah,
chance. Like, that's really cool.
yeah. No, I mean, I think like I've never worked for a big tech company. Like I just haven't. Like I've worked for companies where tech is sort of like a almost always a cost center,
I see. Okay.
where and like your hands just get tied a little bit, right? Like you can want to experiment with stuff, but unless you can find a way to like sort of shoehorn it into a project or like get it like get approval from somebody that you've somehow sweet talked, like they care about like the company I work for now cares about the dentists. Like they don't care about my resume. They don't care about, whether or not I have to be up until midnight every night fixing a bug. I mean, on some level they do. But like they want they want stability. They don't want
Right.
the shiny new toy. And if anything, they don't want the shiny new toy, right? So having that little window in there was like, oh, what if we experimented with this? Like, what is, tell me the new minimized APIs from Microsoft. Like, they're not going to
Yeah.
give us time to go through and refactor stuff to that.
Right.
Like, let's
Well,
see how
what's
it
the
works.
benefit of that going to be? Like, make a business
Right.
case for it. If it's not going
Yep.
to save us money or make us money,
Yep.
like, oh, let's not do it.
Why do it? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Which is why, like, some places. I mean, not the place I'm at, but some places that I've worked at are still running VB script or like VB script sites internally, right? Like the old .asp files, and it's like if it works, it works.
Right.
If it's not the bottleneck in a business function, no one's going to touch it.
But that's a really important point though, right? And I think like to reiterate on this because I know that from conversations online people get completely bent out of shape on this, but I think until you see like more of the business side of things, like you may not realize like why that's the case. And I'm not saying that we should never refactor things or never address tech debt or never
Mm,
experiment. I'm not saying that at all.
sure.
But to be of the mindset like we always want to go like perfecting code or we have to grab the latest thing, like this can be a huge detriment to a company if you're in a position where you're creating costs or introducing risks instead
Yep.
of like we're a business. And you said it
Yep.
earlier, being in this situation where founders are like, how do we get the next paycheck to people? Like,
Yeah.
what, you're going to go refactor to minimal APIs because it's new and shiny? Like, come
Yeah.
on.
No,
Like,
you're not.
it starts to seem ridiculous when you put those pieces together. But I always try to remind people that if you're working somewhere and it feels like as a developer and you're feeling like we never get to do tech debt, we never get to do anything else, like you need to start trying to pitch these things as like a business motivated
Oh,
reason.
100%. Yes. 100%. Like I know it's not like one of the things that I don't want to get too much into the
Sure.
sort of the chain of whatever, but like the company that I was working at was spending like just well, I could talk about this in general. Like software engineers these days don't have. I feel like they've started to pay less and less attention to the database,
Right.
just because it's like either the company they work for has a DBA, or a couple DBAs that are supposed to they take care of that kind of thing. Or they're using an ORM, right, or something like that, where they don't really have to understand what's
Right.
going on. I mean,
Just
they
enough there's
do
data
on some
going in and
level,
data coming out and maybe some
right?
relationships, but like not the
That's it. But like the amount, but usually what happens in those cases is, and it's a false choice that gets made by either DevOps or old school operations people. They're like, we can't like the engineers have done everything they can. We cannot ask them to go in and do more. So
Sure.
now we need to go to 64 cores on our database server or 96 cores on our database server. And it's like, yeah, no, you can, like, there's a part of that feedback loop there
Yeah.
where you yourself can be like, hey, you need to do some index tuning or
Yeah.
you need to do whatever. And like one of the big ways that I've been able to impact a couple different companies over the years is like drastically reduce their database costs. I'm not a database guy. Like I know nothing about at all. Like the chief data people that I've worked with would laugh at this idea, but I'm just like, hey, why are we joining to this? Well, the
Right.
ORM's doing it. Yeah, but why?
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't make sense.
because it
Oh,
works, right? Like,
yeah, it works. Yeah, but you're spending a lot of money here.
yeah,
So in any event, but those are the kind of like those are those windows that you have where it's like you need to find a way to justify that as tech debt, right?
right.
And it's not as simple as refactoring a method to stop using AutoMapper because they're now a company or whatever the new
Sure.
deal is. It's you need to reach across boundaries and be like, hey, how are we affecting you? Let's fix that so that you
Right.
can come out of that chaos. One, looking great to the upper management because you've just now saved them a couple $1 million. But two, your software is better, like
Yeah.
fundamentally better. Anyway,
So
anyway,
yeah, you started talking about P zeros, and I know that before we got recording here, you had mentioned like people versus like technology P zeros. So this first one that you started introducing here was like a people P zero, where
yes.
basically there was a huge change, and not
Mhm.
only with like sort of like a person in leadership changing, but then like people like leaving, and like it's just like it's very different.
Yep.
And maybe it's worth kind of saying like from your perspective when you go to define like what a P zero is, because I think um, for context, and I didn't say this before we started recording. I think for me, when I say P zero, I think what we're closer talking to is almost like a Sev zero in like in the language that I
Mhm.
would use. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the only problem with that is like it's heavily anchored to an incident, like
Yes.
specifically like a live site incident for us. But I wanted to bring that up because I think how you were defining P zero is very interesting. That it's not just a technology thing. So do you want to take a moment and kind of like walk through
Sure.
like how you were framing that?
So basically how I frame P zeros is really like it's a point at which a fundamental assumption
Mm,
about the nature of a relationship between two things is revealed to be untrue, right? So there's some assumption that was made by somebody somewhere. And maybe it was 15 years ago, maybe it was 5 minutes ago, that all of a sudden just like it just, oh, that's not true at all.
right.
And now some effort needs to be made to like fix it, right? And there's for anybody who doesn't know, yeah, Sev zero, P zero, I think are synonymous. Um, but like there's multiple layers here, right? So like a P like for us, right? A P3 is something's broken. There's a workaround. It's a small amount of users. Like get it out on your normal release cycle. Like don't even interrupt the sprint.
Right.
Sub two or a P2 or I guess P3 is there's something that's broken. There's not an easy workaround. Release a hot fix maybe,
Sure.
depending on how disruptive that would be. A P2 would be there's something broken for a large amount of people, like on a critical path through the software. So in the example that I'm in right now, like if people couldn't order dentures anymore for whatever reason, right? Or we couldn't get estimates from the insurance companies for whatever
Yeah.
reason.
That's
That would
blocking
be
like actual
yes,
scenarios from happening. Yeah.
yes, yeah. And it's like like hundreds or thousands of people are being impacted.
Yeah. It's not
Uh,
like a user's one user's scenario is not working. It's like this is a primary scenario. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then like a P1 is the whole thing's down. Like it's like you don't know, like literally somebody threw in a Teams channel or a Slack channel and said, "Hey, what's wrong with the site?" And that's literally all you know. And you get there and you're like, "Oh, nothing works,
Nothing's working. Yeah.
like at all. What has happened?"
Yeah.
And it really like it becomes almost like it very much becomes like just a murder mystery at that point, right? Like what changed, and different groups break off sort of organically and try to investigate different things. Like the networking team will go off and look at the networking logs, or the engineers typically will they'll open up Spinnaker and see what the last 15 releases were and how that could have possibly changed something. There's planned outages, but then there's unplanned outages, right?
Right.
And then really you start to see like in a really juicy P1, you start to see how like this person made this change and this person made this change, and either one of them independently are okay,
Right.
right? But they made them at the same time, and that caused some sort of cache collision, or that changed how we're reading stuff in Launch Darkly, or whatever it is, and then the world just falls apart, right?
Right.
And you know, I am, I'm, and it could, you know, we were talking about the Google thing from like 2 months ago, where I think it was about that, you know, where some engineer like changed a YAML file and pushed it. And I don't know if you knew the whole story on that. Like some
Not all
engineer
the details. No.
changed the YAML file. There was no validation in the pipeline. So by the time the YAML file landed where it was going, the code that was reading it there had a null pointer. And
Okay.
the way the global sort of, you know, instant replication happened, it just took everything. It was one file, one field in one file, just took everything down.
And that's why we
And then
don't use YAML, right? But
but like the problem, I think the reason it lasted so long, I think I remember reading this, is the system they would use to fix it was the system that was broken. So like it became this circular loop where I think they had to go in and start manually fixing these files that were distributed on all these nodes, because the distribution like control panel just didn't work anymore. Anyway, so that's a P0, and like that's how they leak from one like entity to another. Like Google's P0 became our P0, became our physicians or our doctors P0. Those are somewhat okay because it's like, okay, they're down, but it's not us. Like,
it's interesting, right? Because like it's a different type of pressure.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
you might go like, okay, like if, it's there's something relieving to know, like, hey, we didn't go screw this up. Like, whew, okay, deep breath. Now you
Yes,
go, wait a second, people are still being screwed over though. So like,
yes.
like
What can
now
we do?
it's like, how can we? It feels like more, how can we help them versus less
A
of a, oh
hundred
crap,
percent.
like it's my fault, it's my fault. What are we gonna do? Like,
Yeah, which is where like another reason that I really, and I don't want to like say I really enjoy P0s, because that like I don't.
understood.
I mean, I do, but like I don't. You know what I mean? I think. Like you can like software engineering and systems design becomes jazz at that point, right? Like you're just like, okay, what? It's not best practices, but we need to have
Mhm.
these people up and running in the next hour. What can we actually do to
Yes.
make this work, right? Can we reroute traffic? Can we jump off, you know, Cloudflare for years was having all these problems. Like, can we get off Cloudflare? What risk does that give us? Like, how do we route traffic through our network or through this other office so that these facilities become active again? It really, you know, I think the main thing is you just learn a lot about the people you're working with, right? We talked a little bit about this. Like, you really learn like who knows their stuff enough to play that jazz, right?
Hmm.
And who knows, you know, who knows things that they don't know, right? Or they don't know that they know. Like,
Yeah.
you know, somebody's like, "Oh, wait a minute, did you just say this word? Do you think? Oh, that's what." And then all of a sudden, all the dots connect, right?
Right.
It's when they go. I've been upset at P0s. I've been mad at P0s. I've never been upset that I was on a P1 or P0 call, right? Like, so for all the new engineers out there, like anytime something goes wrong, if there's an emergency Slack channel, emergency Teams channel, you see something go wrong, like jump on that call, because you're going to learn how all of this stuff connects. Like your little for loop that was, you know, doing whatever sits inside this giant ecosystem. And if you don't see how those things relate, like you pick it up during a P0, like
Yeah. You
it's
almost have no choice but to like be forced into learning, right? Because you're put into this environment where you're seeing all these other people, probably, like if we're talking especially about junior developers, you're probably around other people that are significantly more senior, more tenure, more experienced, and they're also going through this learning process around you,
hundred
where
percent.
people, I like how you were talking about like different functions might be like role functions might be looking at
Mhm.
different things, trying to investigate, trying to pull this information together to really understand like what is this scenario. And those individuals are going to be learning from the other people as well. So you're in this
Yep.
like this think tank of people just being like, we have to connect our brains and pull in
Yep.
whatever data we can. You have to start when that information's flowing in. It's like, okay, well, what can we rule out, right? So a lot of times these conversations happen, and it's like, oh well, that's not the right answer. Oh no, like, but
Right.
it's not really. That's okay. Like, it's good to know things that aren't related. You rule that out. You can go park that.
Yeah.
Go focus on the next part, right? Like, really interesting learning experiences for everyone.
So one of the things, World War Z. Have you seen World War Z, the movie?
I have
So
not.
one of
I've
the
heard of
things.
it though. Yeah,
Oh, okay. There's a scene in the movie where I don't think it's spoilers at this point,
sure.
where like Israel survives the zombie apocalypse at first better than everybody else, and they're trying to figure out why. And the Brad Pitt's character is talking to the general or whatever, and he's like, how did you survive? And they were like, well, we heard all this stuff, and like everybody agreed it was nonsense, but like we have a policy, and I don't know if this is actually a policy or just something in the book,
Sure.
but like a policy where if 9 people out of the 10 agree, then it's the duty of the 10th person to take it seriously as if it's a thing, right? So like when I jump on those P0 calls and I hear we are 100% sure that it is this network segment that's down, or it's this this microservice that's causing the problem, or whatever. Like, if it's not my microservice or it's not my network, like if I'm not directly involved, like I force myself to be like, okay, assume they're wrong, right? Assume that everybody agrees that this is the problem. Like, I'm going to assume that they've made an assumption
Okay.
and go off and see if I can find any evidence at all that what they're doing is wrong, right? I'm going through Grafana, I'm going through Google Cloud Logs, I'm going through all this stuff going, wait a minute, when did this start? When are you saying the time started?
Mm-hmm.
Like, time zones, when it comes to these outages, like, are the most irritating things in the world, because somebody will be like, oh, it started at 9:30. And then
Yeah.
everybody localizes that in their head. And the guy who's helping you that's on the West Coast is like, I see this started at 7:30. It's like, yeah, it's the same time.
Yeah.
But like forcing yourself to just disagree, or not even disagree, but like just make the assumption that their assumptions are all flawed.
Yeah.
Uh, has
You get
been,
extra validation from different
yeah,
angles. Like, you might try to
yeah,
disprove it, and you're like, everything is that from my perspective is also proving that this is true. That's
yes,
great.
yeah,
Like,
it's great.
that's really helpful.
Yeah. And the other thing, and I'll say this too, like the other thing that P0s have, they're very egalitarian. Like rank and position and titles and all that stuff go right out the window. It's all about solving the problem. It's not about anybody, like when they go well, I'll say. It's not about anybody jockeying for position. It's not for anybody trying to make a name for themselves. It's like solve the problem. Whether it's an SVP that hasn't touched this like weird obscure system that nobody has looked at in like 20 years, and maybe that's where the problem is, versus a junior dev who just did their first deploy. Both people have equal weight in those calls, because they're both, like, it could be the junior guy's issue, or it could be the senior guy's issue, right? Like, let's just solve the problem and we'll worry about RCAs and the 5 Ys and all that nonsense some other time, but let's get everybody back online. And there's a beauty to that, right? And the thing that's most often frustrating is when people bring in their, like, I'm the SVP of Shma, like, you're all going to take direction from me on this. And it's like, no, you don't know. Like, you're being disruptive is what you're being.
Yeah. And it's actually not helpful.
Yeah, it's not helpful at all.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think
really the subject matter experts are the ones who, like, they should be running those calls, like, hands down.
And
I don't care if the CTO's on.
I think where I've seen, like, it's not it's someone stepping in to help organize, I have found to be helpful, but not
Yeah.
not to bark orders, because I've seen people that join those, and like one of the roles that they play is actually like they're observing chaos, and like they're saying, okay, or they're observing, like, okay, we have, team X, team Y, and team Z. Like, they're able to see, okay, I can see the subject matter experts kind of doing their thing, but what's happening is the communication isn't effective, or it's like people aren't
Right.
aligning. So some people step in to play that role of like, let me help organize the information as it's flowing in,
Yep.
and that could be helpful. But what they're not doing is like, everyone stop, listen to me, and I will organize like
Right.
what you have to go do. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah. That
not
does
the
not
order
work.
barking.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We like the company I'm at now did a really. I am mostly anti-process when it comes to things. Like I believe that process just begets other process, and pretty soon it's just a bureaucracy and nothing gets done.
Mhm.
One of the things that they did maybe 4 or 5 months ago is they introduced this thing called a MIM team, a major incident management team
Okay.
for P0s and P1s. And their job solely is to communicate with the field. Like, so every time something happens, the MIM team gets called on. Like, I think most of the engineers are like, why are these people here? Like at first, and then pretty quickly realized the amount of value that they were bringing, because it was like, oh, they don't have to send out a 5 paragraph email updating people on the status. These other people, these MIM people will do it.
Yeah.
And they'll take that off of our plates, because like if you're sitting there and unable to do your job, the worst case scenario is you don't know why, right? Like you don't know why. You're just like your boss comes by and like, hey, how come those numbers aren't crunched or whatever? And you're like, I can't do anything. And they're
Yeah.
gonna be like, why? And then but these like the MIM team, like I think, yeah, I was definitely kind of like, okay, is this overhead? Like, what is
Right.
this? And then,
You see it in
once one
practice,
or
and
two things happen, it's like, oh, okay, all right, I see
right.
it. And now, I'll bring that to the next company I work at, where I'm like, who's on our MIM team? So anyway,
Yeah, that's super cool. I think one of the things you mentioned that I kind of wanted to reiterate that I really like. I've talked about this in sort of under different circumstances, but I don't know the like a good quote for it exactly, so I'm gonna butcher it, but something along the
sure.
lines of like, constraints breed creativity when it comes to engineering, and
Yes.
I like thinking about it this way because as software developers, as software engineers, there's many patterns for many things. Many problems have already been solved. That's why we had Stack Overflow that was doing so well for so long. Now we have all the other LLMs to help us along with the same type of thing. But a lot of
Yeah.
things have been solved. They might be packaged a different way. They might have a different color, different face, but a lot of problems are solved in similar ways. And I think what's interesting is that we can take different challenges or different engineering problems, and when you start adding constraints onto them or changing the constraints, suddenly it like can force you to be very creative. So I'm going to try to come up with an example off the top of my head that's probably not going to work, but if you took something that was very simple and then you said, okay, but you know that you wanted to set up a database for your web server, and you can go pick any database you want now and any web technology, and then someone says, but you need to make sure that like it can deploy in like literally 5 seconds, and it has to have
Yeah.
a size constraint of like X number of bytes, and you're like, nothing's going to work for that, and they're like, those are your constraints, like
Shoot straight. Get to it.
get creative. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think it like it's a double like best case scenario is that, right? Best case scenario is, it really, let me put it this way. I think it depends on who's setting the constraints, right? I've been in situations that, it's clear that people are doing, what's called resume driven development, right?
sure.
Where they're just like, I want to put this down, so I'm going to use this technology stack. It's like, okay, really? Uh, Go work on a side project. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to, like,
Yeah.
the business
That's
doesn't
what
want
they're
that. Just
for.
go away. Yeah. Um, if it's a business person putting the constraint on it, like, the most they can have is 5 seconds of downtime, right? Like, because it affects the call center, and every minute in the call center that isn't available constitutes $200,000 of lost
Sure.
revenue. Okay, sure, that makes sense. When it's engineers putting constraints on themselves for no reason, I think that's what I mean by like process begets process.
Yeah.
It's like we have these, and sometimes it's not. So like we have DevOps tools now that we never had. Like literally, 20 years ago, when I needed to deploy to production, it was, one of two things. I would do a local build. I would zip up the bin folder. I would email it to myself. I would open a webmail client on the server. I'd unzip it and I'd overwrite the bin folder.
You are the
Or
deployment system, yes.
yes, or in some cases you could get maybe sign off on like an SFTP that like where you could like version it a little better or drop it a little better. Then like all these tools came out. Like I think Octopus Deploy was probably the first one. And then Spinnaker came out, and now Argo, and all these great tools that let you like push code out in like a matter of seconds, right? But we've responded as like a lot of companies have sort of responded by like saying like, okay, is it good though that we can push code out in 5 seconds?
Right.
Should we have a process now so that the deployment takes just as much time as it used to take when I was zipping folders up and emailing to myself? Or should we put all of this stuff in front of that to stop it from happening? It's like, well, maybe a little of both,
Right.
but like we shouldn't put unnecessary walls up, right? I mean,
Totally.
we just shouldn't. Anyway.
Yeah, and so the thought around like being in these like P0, Sev 0 situations, it, to me is very interesting when it comes to those constraints, because I like what you said earlier around like, okay, one of the primary things that you want to do in those situations is to mitigate, right? Like, sure, root causing would be lovely, but like if people are not having availability, like probably want to take care of that right away. And depending on where things are at, you might go, wait, we have all sorts of constraints that we don't normally have. If I'm just making this up, but if you're like, if it took an hour to build and an hour to deploy, and you're like, we don't even have a code fix. So like if you wanted to do something in less than those 2 hours, never mind the code fix, like that's a constraint that you now want to try and work within. If you said we need to make sure that people are up in the next hour, okay, there's a constraint. What can we do within that constraint? And now you have to start having creative engineering solutions to go tackle those types of problems. So
100%. Like, and that's when the scene from Apollo 11 or whatever, that movie, the Tom Hanks movie, where they're like, not only do I want to like see the plans, I want to talk to the guy who actually built the bolt in the factory, right? That's when you're like, you pull the junior engineer, the senior engineer, the staff engineer, like, okay, tell me exactly how this works. Yeah. Right. Like, tell me, like, is there some play here? Is there a configuration setting that we can turn off? Is there anything that we can do to get that, to get over this hump? Right. Because right now we're dead in the water. And that, I think, like, that may be when I realized the power of these meetings, as I was pulled into a meeting like that. But like, always bring junior engineers into these things. Always bring your staff in at time of providing or whatever, because they're going to realize like, oh wait, like that actually does matter. Like, is this a for loop or a while loop? Like, I mean, it kind of matters sometimes, but like, like there's really specific things where you go, oh, we can just turn this system off, and then that won't process those events, and then that'll free this system up over here, and then you talk to the business people and you're like, hey, how do you feel about like not getting like an accurate, accounts receivable report until the morning? And they're like, oh, that's fine. Like, I didn't need it this afternoon anyway. Like, oh, sweet. We can kill all of this traffic and all this chatter on the network. And suddenly we now have the headroom to actually bring other people back online.
Right. And if you had gone into that being like, but like, we can't touch this because the system, and we can't affect that. And like, if you don't start challenging some of these things, like you have to start making these decisions in some situations where it's like, we may need to make a trade-off here. And that trade-off might be this other system, this other part of the business might be disrupted temporarily. But in fact, it's significantly more beneficial to disrupt that temporarily and get 99% of everything else back to like the spot.
So I'm wondering, like, hearing you say that, like, I'm wondering if like the definition of a P0 is isn't like a chain of assumptions. An assumption is broken, right?
Yeah.
Of like, Google's always going to be on, or SQL Server will be performant, or whatever. That really forces you to break other assumptions
I think
in
so,
order
though.
to restore. Yeah, interesting.
I think
Okay.
so because like even when you had started giving me a little bit of a heads up before we were recording on how you were thinking about defining that, when you started talking about it like an assumption, like you assume something to be true and now that's disrupted. When I think about yeah, you kind of said maybe it's too philosophical, but we're kind of going there with it. So I think
Right.
what triggered for me was this idea that like when you are assuming like a truth, like it's sort of like becomes a law in your mind, that's in my mind, it's generally based on other assumptions that have to hold true. And if you start unwinding that a little bit, for example, in this like example we were just going through, this other service for processing reports or something like that always has to be up. But like
Does it?
does it? Like,
Yeah.
because maybe we cannot do that temporarily, and now you start challenging other assumptions. And I think that that's
Yeah.
really a critical thing to be able to do as you go through these, because when you have those constraints and you can start kind of like breaking the rules for other things, that's where you can like start getting more flexibility to deliver
Yep.
your options.
Yep. And like we haven't touched on it too much, but like this like we mostly focused on like technology stuff,
Sure.
like services going down,
Hmm.
outages, whatever. But when it comes to people, this holds too, right? Like when you go, okay, like so for as a people manager, right? Like people, my guys, my folks have P0s all the time in their lives, right?
Hmm.
Like something's going to go wrong, right? I won't get into, I can't technically get into the details, right? But like everything from family members getting sick and needing care to, and that's as I get up there in age, like parents getting sick, and
Hmm.
like it's not just kids or your spouse, or during COVID, this was a huge, like there was a lot of mental health stuff that was happening. People just isolating for weeks on end. There was one guy that worked for me. I was like, I'm pretty sure he's been wearing that shirt for 3 days. Like, I need to have,
It's
like,
his favorite shirt, though.
how do I have this conversation with him?
Yeah.
But like like coming at people and really looking at them from like a P0, like, okay, is this a fundamental change of our relationship where I have to
Hmm.
change other assumptions? And if so, what are those, and how do I make them as minimal as possible? Right? Like, do we need to do FMLA? Do you need to go on leave? Do you need additional support from whatever legal system that we have? Like usually there's some sort of legal advisor benefit at a company. Like, do I need to forward this to them? Is this going to be, and frankly, like, is this a constraint that I'm violating that HR is going to be okay with? Right.
Right.
And those are the constraint, the same kind of thing, right? Like, I am going to go tell HR that this is what we're doing. Does that violate a constraint that they have set? Right. Especially for the logistics company. Like there are, zero tolerance policies whenever, just for insurance reasons, right?
Mm.
At logistics companies, people are driving forklifts around, people are using heavy equipment. Um, if somebody comes into work a little, hungover from the night before or whatever it is, like that's like zero
Yeah.
tolerance is zero
You might be like,
tolerance.
I know Bob, and I'm like, I feel like he's whatever, he's a little tired, but like that's fine. But like, no, like
Right.
there is
Like
zero
that's not
tolerance.
okay. And
Yeah.
then you need to unwind that a little bit and go like, okay, is this the first time? Like, what do I
Right.
know about what's going on with Bob right now? Like, is this the first time this has happened? Is this like a black swan event, or is this becoming a problem? And
Right.
then if it is becoming a problem, and this scenario actually did happen, like
Sorry,
what do
Bob.
I
Yeah.
need to do as a manager to help Bob, like, I guess first as a person, right? Because they're having issues, Or or what do I need to do from a company perspective? Like usually the company perspective comes like 3 weeks later, frankly. But like, what do I need to do to help Bob, and how is that going to line up against the constraints that have been set down?
Yeah.
Um, I've had people, the other, yeah. So yeah, and sometimes the relationship ends, right? Sometimes the result of the P0 is, oh, I cannot accept whatever redefinition of this P is like whatever assumptions are being dismissed here as a
Right.
result of this P0. Like I can't accept them as a manager, or the employee can't accept them as the employee. Um, you know, it's very rare, but what happens, right? Um, and so yeah,
That's no, it's definitely interesting because I agree. Like the same concepts apply. The I think one for me that has come up that I never considered this in my time before Microsoft because I worked at a startup for 8 years. We were at the point where we had like a satellite office, but it was like 4 hours away. Like it's really just a different office. It's not like we had
sure,
remote employees everywhere or something. But when I came to Microsoft, it is a global company, and I didn't like, and I was here on a visa, so I'm originally from Canada and the US on a
sure.
visa, and I barely even understand how my own visa works. I just don't know how these things go. And then having employees that are on other visa types, and then
Yeah,
like basically not getting the lottery placement, and then I'm being told like, hey, like your employee can't be here anymore. But
yeah,
what's really cool, and I don't know all the details of how this works, but at least in some situations where this has happened, Microsoft has been very good at like doing all of the pre-work and letting me know, like, here's all of these options. Like, we do this all the time. Like, don't worry. But it's interesting because like that ends up becoming a decision for the employee. They might go like, no, I don't want to relocate to another office to still be employed by Microsoft. Like that's way too disruptive in my life. Or
yeah.
and rightfully so. Like, so it's this in this situation, a very interesting challenge to go navigate someone else's like visa status. Like I said, I barely even understood how my own worked. So yeah, just a really
I am.
disruptive thing.
I have had a number of H1B employees over the years, like folks that work for me. I still don't fully understand the system entirely, right? And I'm the one I'm the one who's responsible for providing the documentation for these folks to the immigration lawyers
Mhm.
and HR, and it's like, so what level of detail do you want? Because
Right.
some, like, if you go too far in one direction on the detail, it's like, oh, now you've gone too far. Now you've said something you shouldn't have said. It's like, oh, come on.
But you didn't
Like,
say enough. This other like,
right. Yeah.
yeah.
It's very annoying. So one of the other, it's interesting you bring this up. So like, um, talking about assumptions, like the number of assumptions that have to be made about uh, hiring H1Bs, or working with folks that are hiring people with H1Bs, or like hiring people that are in another country. Like the last company, or two companies ago, one of that, we had a number of contractors that were working out of South America.
Mm.
Um, Great people, huge skilled people. One, like, I could not have done half the stuff we did without them. But like maybe not a full blown civil war, but certainly like a very disruptive event happened. I think the guy was from Peru, and it was just like, oh, how do we? Okay, so this is a P0 for you for sure.
Mhm.
Like,
Yep.
what do we need to do to make sure that you're safe and healthy as a
Right.
person? And then, can we do anything to make sure that you stay employed here?
Yeah.
Because, like, I get it. Like, I want to make sure that you're fine, but the company, like, we can't, like, say you're on indefinite leave,
Yeah. Yeah.
pending.
Like even
It's
if you wanted to, can you
right.
like
Can I?
maybe
Yeah.
they don't even have employment laws that allow it. Like there's so many things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that bit us. Like, we were we were gonna I don't know, most people know, so you can't actually directly contract, or like we couldn't directly contract with individuals, right? So there's like an agency that's
I see.
actually a legal entity within the company, and you pay the company and the company pays them, and of course they take their cut. And it's like, well, wait a minute, why can't we just go down there and start a company? And then you realize, oh wait, like there's like 20-year residency requirements, and like I was like, I just want that person to write to continue to make awesome improvements to my front end.
Right.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
But sometimes
So many
you can't.
loopholes, or
Loopholes,
not loopholes, bars to jump over. I don't know what the right phrase is, but
yeah.
yeah.
Like, if we could just get past that,
Yeah.
and maybe some other stuff, we'd all be fine.
Yeah. But no, it's I think it's super interesting that, this type of thing can, like, a P0 by your definition comes up not only from a technology perspective, but with people. I think that for
Mhm.
folks that are, watching and listening, that on the people side, it probably seems less obvious because it probably comes up less often. But in
Right.
someone in a position where you're managing people, or in a directorship position where there's even more people below you, you'll see these types of things like bubble up more because your umbrella and surface area of visibility to them is greater. So, a manager managing a team might periodically see these types of things. Someone in a directorship position who has managers like reporting up to them then may have a lot of visibility across all their managers, where these, like, sort of micro, it seems like a micro thing at that level, but it's, P0 to the individuals. But you see more of this, and it is
Yeah.
real.
Well, I think you mentioned it at the beginning of the call, right? Like the national organic thing is you go from engineer to manager, right? And most times, I would say 99% of the times, we was like, oh, we need to hire a manager, like who's got the best soft skills out of the engineers that we have,
Yeah.
that is respected, that is, will take ownership, for the team if something goes wrong. But that doesn't mean they've dealt with a lot of stuff in their life, right? In fact, most times it means they haven't.
Yep.
I was thinking about this earlier about assumptions, right? I mean, most of the assumptions, like every time you hire somebody, like you're making 1,000 assumptions, right? And every time you go to work for someone, you're making 1,000 assumptions. And some of those assumptions you are like can't verify, right? They're just impossible to check. So like having a manager who is like, comes to me and says, hey, I've got an employee whose kid is really not doing well, and they're like, or usually what happens, frankly, is the manager comes to me if I haven't worked with them a lot, and they're like, hey, so and so isn't, is struggling, like we need to talk to HR, they're not doing their job. And it's like, okay, why? Like, I don't care why, they're not doing their job. It's like, okay. So
Step one.
first of all, let's back up.
Yeah.
Like, let's find out why they're not, because they were good last month, right? Like, let's find out what has changed. It's almost like the whole P0 process for like investigating. It's like, let's find out like who deployed some code to this person.
Yeah.
Like what happened? Like, well, their kid, and then it turns out like their kid fell off a slide and broke their leg. It's like, okay, so they're having to, like, their kid can't go out and play anymore, and they're having to spend more time entertaining their kid than they used to, and it's disrupting their
And
life.
there's more
Okay,
appointments, and they have to be away from
right,
their desk a lot more. And
100, yeah. That was totally like way too true during COVID, but like, yes, yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, so we've assumed that this person can work 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day or whatever it is we're expecting. Let's, that assumption has turned out to be false.
correct.
Or it's turned out to be false because inherent in our assumption is like those 9 hours have to be contiguous, right?
Right.
Or those 9 hours have to be when everybody else is working those 9 hours.
But that goes back to saying, like, we have these other assumptions that, like,
Yes.
we have to go
exactly.
invalidate potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, can they work in the morning? Can they work after the kid goes to sleep at night? Like,
Yeah.
is this impacting other people? Like, how far does the P0 spread?
Yeah, do they
Um,
just need flexibility in their working
yeah,
schedule? Like, is that really what it's coming down to? Is that everything else would be manageable for them except the core business
yeah,
hours are 9 to 5, and like that's just not going to work. And if you could talk to them, they would be totally happy to go do like some morning kind of like shift and some
yeah.
evening shift, and they would be great with that. Like,
Why are we even?
challenge those
Yeah, then it's like,
assumptions. Yeah,
why are we even having this conversation at that point,
yeah.
right? Like, and I think some of that is like, and I struggle. I personally struggle with this a lot. Like, I like to take a lot of the bureaucratic crap off of my
Hmm.
team's plates, right? Just so that they can focus on what they're good at. But what that means a lot of times is they don't realize what the bureaucratic crap is. So when they get exposed to it, they're like, "What is this nonsense?"
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, if you think about like that scenario we just played out, where the kid's got a broken leg and like like if the reaction was, okay, let's fire him, like let's put him on a pip, let's get him out the door, like, okay, now you gotta open a rec with HR,
Mhm.
right, for a replacement, which is a nightmare, right? I mean, it's a nightmare for me. Like, I don't like paperwork, so like, and it's nothing to do with the HR folks. It's just like, I gotta fill out what form, where. Then you gotta
It's not
spend
just check the box on the website and the role's live and we just wait for the best
right,
person to show up. Yeah.
right, and then you got to interview, and 50% of the interviews don't go past stage one. So now, like, I'm sitting there like, okay, I'm now spending 60 hours a month interviewing people that are never going to come through the door. So it's like, or we could just say they can work flex time for a little bit because the leg's not going to be broken forever.
Right.
And then, yeah, but sometimes, I mean, you have to give that context to your people. That like the bigger picture here is not just, oh, this person who's messing up your burn down chart uh, isn't going to be around anymore, so the
Yeah.
stats are going to be look good again. Like, who cares? Like, that's going to cost us more in the long run than anything else.
Yeah.
But anyway,
No,
yeah,
I think it's super interesting. I wanted to say thanks for bringing up this topic because I think when you had started discussing it, I was thinking about times where I've sat in incident bridges. I know the first time I was ever on call at Microsoft, like the very first weekend, I started as a backup, and with one of my employees who was more like significantly more junior than me. He was the primary, and we had a security incident, and like I'm like, I don't know what to do, but it's going to be like such a
yeah,
good learning experience. There's no way that you cannot learn from being in those situations. So, um, yeah, I think what you said earlier around like, hey, if you are more junior, if you have the opportunity to at least observe and like, I'm not necessarily saying like, hey, like go get your hands dirty and get disruptive
sure,
necessarily, but
yeah,
at
yeah,
least to observe and trying to follow along with what's happening to go understand, I think is a tremendous opportunity because you will learn and you're going to be
you have
learning
no
things
choice.
at a significantly faster rate than like you know uh, I'm chipping away at part of the code base, building out some features. Like you'll see how parts of the system come together in ways that you didn't know because other people didn't even know. So
Know it, right? Exactly.
yeah. So I wanted to say thanks again for that,
Oh, sure.
Michael. If people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way? Is it Twitter if they want to strike up
It's
a conversation?
probably Twitter. Yeah,
Okay.
it's probably Twitter. I left Facebook years ago. I'm not on any other social media platforms. So it's just at MDKill on Twitter.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. This is super cool. Any parting words for a more junior audience that could help guide them? I didn't tell you about this ahead of time, so I don't mean to put you on the spot. But
Um. Yeah. So many. Like, it's 20 years ago, 20, almost 30 years ago now, like this college roommate that I had said that, like, every single thing is a learning experience. Like, every single thing. And I think at the time, I mean, I think he was saying it because something had gone wrong in my life or whatever. But I was like, no, it's
right.
not. I understand the world. I'm 18. Um, but everything is everything, like literally everything is learning experience. And if you're struggling, it's because you're learning something. Like there's some fundamental assumption about the world that you're unwinding in your own head. And that's, I think, what learning is. I'm not entirely sure, not an education guy, but like, everything you can learn something from.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, and it's a good way to reframe things that might seem like they suck in the moment too. So awesome. Okay, well, thanks again, Michael, and I definitely appreciate you being here.